Yes, I want to echo what I said before. All of these are on YouTube. And so if you've missed anything, if you're listening to it by YouTube, if you're listening to the video, happen to just get into this one and you don't realize how you stumbled upon it, we have all these from the beginning on YouTube under Fanter Ron, Fanterron, under YouTube. What you have to do is go to Fanter Ron. It's on the Carpenter's House playlist. So let's get into the scripture study tonight. Last week we were in Revelation chapter 13. We were talking about the seven-headed beast. We actually went through and we looked and we named with the help of the prophet Daniel. We named all the heads of the beast. And now we're actually going to start here in the book of Daniel, and we're going to go from there. But we're talking about how we can identify the Antichrist. We have identified those seven heads. We know that beast is an Antichrist kingdom. We know the Antichrist is more than one individual. It is an individual. It's an individual. It's also a kingdom. And there's also a false prophet that works in conjunction with him. And there'll be a one-world religion when he's done. And so let's start with Daniel chapter 7 here. We see up here, you can see the picture. Now this beast, Daniel actually saw four beasts. And we have here, Nebuchadnezzar in the book of Daniel also saw, if you're familiar, with an image. And there was the image had a gold head, arms of silver, a brass tummy, iron legs, and feet that were iron and clay, and then 10 toes. And this beast, this 10-horned beast that Daniel saw in his vision, matches the iron legs on the statue that Nebuchadnezzar saw. In fact, you can see the iron right here. You see it says iron teeth. And so there's a match there. But let's go ahead and read this out of Daniel 7:7. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse, or it was different from all the beasts that were before it. And it had 10 horns. We see this map up here. This is the old Roman Empire. Roman Empire existed from 160 BC to 476 AD. How many heard of the fall of the Roman Empire? Okay, so that's what happened around 476 AD. Rome fell. But this beast in Daniel's time, this 10-horned beast, actually had its fulfillment in the Roman Empire. And you can see all the map area. I pointed this out before also. When these beasts rose up, it says the four beasts rose from the sea. And here you can see it's around the Mediterranean Sea. Whether it was the Babylonian kingdom or the Persian kingdom or the Grecian kingdom or the Roman kingdom or the other beasts that actually rose up that we've covered, they all have to do around that area of the Mediterranean Sea. So that's a good thing to know as you're going through the prophecy here. And you can see here, this might not look familiar at all, but if you can imagine, there's actually a statue. We talked about the image of Nebuchadnezzar. There was, like I said, the head of gold, the arms of silver, a brass tummy, two iron legs, and we get down to the feet and the toes. And the final kingdom is represented by the feet and the toes. Now, what we have said more than once through this study is that when you get down to the feet and the toes, the next thing that happens, there's this boulder, this rock that comes, and it's made without hands, and it's like somebody, an invisible hand, throws it against the statue. It hits the feet. And when it hits the feet, the whole statue comes tumbling down. And that rock happens to be the kingdom that God's going to set up by his Messiah. We all know who the Messiah is, right? Jesus. And so if we're focusing in on the feet, if we if we see where we're getting there in prophecy towards, we're covering the feet, we see the fulfillment of this, then we know the coming of Christ has to be pretty close. Because it's the end, right? And you can see up the top here, it says, I would know the truth of the fourth beast. This is Daniel actually says that. He had the vision, but when he first saw it, he didn't know himself. He had to pray about it and get understanding from God. So let's read the scripture. And we're going to look at Daniel chapter 7, verse 19, verse 20, and verse 21. We try to always use the King James as well. So if you have another translation, it might read a little different than what you're used to. But we always try to put the scripture up also in front of you so you have something in context to look at. Anyway, so starting in chapter 7, verse 19 of Daniel. Daniel says, Then I would know the truth of the fourth beast, which was diverse or different from all the others, exceeding dreadful, whose teeth were of iron, his nails of brass, which devoured, brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with his feet, and of the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other which came up, and before whom 3 fell. There's 3 horns of the 10 fell, even of that horn that had eyes and a mouth that spake very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows. And what we see here, you can see this horn rising up. There's actually an 11th horn. There's 10 horns to start with if we went back a couple slides. And you see there's no middle horn there right now. Okay, the beast rises up and has 10 horns. And you can see now there's an 11th horn. And when that horn rises up, 3 are uprooted. Okay, so 3 of the originals are uprooted. And that horn in the middle with the face on it, that is significant. It's not significant but because I used Photoshop and put that horn on there. It's not significant because I put eyes in it and a nose and a mouth, because that's the way Daniel describes it. What's significant about this is that little horn comes up and it rises up. And the significance is, remember, this is depicting the final kingdom at the end time. Okay, and not only is the Roman Empire, and when Jesus existed on the earth, remember it was during the Roman Empire, right? But in the end, this beast will still talk about a latter day kingdom. And I beheld with the same horn made war with the saints and prevailed against them. That's bad news for anyone that's around at that time, right? Now we happen to believe in the rapture, and so I would encourage you to believe in the rapture as well. Talk about the fall of the Roman Empire. And this is how it fell. The western part of the Roman Empire, you see, it was divided into 10 other countries, if you will. 3 of these were actually uprooted here. When we looked at the 7 trumpets in the book of Revelation, if you weren't with us, a couple of these slides come out of that, because what it shows is the 7 trumpets historically clobbered Rome. It was like a punishment that came upon first the pagan Roman Empire, and that began to crumble away. And we can see that's what became a fall of the Roman Empire. They also attacked the southern part of the empire, and then later on it come up and it attacked the eastern part of the Roman Empire. In other words, it was broken up in thirds. And historically, that's what we saw. Well, here, in this slide, we see around 400 A.D. that as far as this western part of the Roman Empire, there was a guy by the name of Alaric, and he led the invasion of the Goths. And you can see the arrows here, how he came in there. You can recognize where Rome is if you always look for the boot. So you can go, you found the boot, it looks like it's kicking a stone. It's actually Sicily. The boot is Italy, and here's Rome. And of course, this all was the Roman Empire, but we're seeing the collapse of the Roman Empire here, because the Roman Empire had to collapse. Remember, talked about 3 horns being uprooted. The Roman Empire actually collapsed so that horn, that 11th horn, could rise up. That's the whole point of the prophecy. We also took this slide out of our previous study on the trumpets. You can see where Attila the Hun also came. You can see up here on the map here. He came around 370 A.D., and it says here along the side here, we'll go ahead and read it. Attila the Hun is on his horse down at the bottom here. But savage, hideous barbarians known for eating raw flesh practically lived on horseback, even slept on horseback. Independent groups known as hordes having their own chieftains. Some say that the Huns were not truly united under one king until Attila became their king. He invaded Ostrogoths, and the king killed himself out of fear. So you can see how ferocious these Huns were, that they scared the king over the Ostrogoths, which was one of those 10 nations, so much that he killed himself. And the Visigoths fled to Roman territory. They never could assimilate, and these refugees hastened the fall of the Roman Empire. I think that says something or speaks something to us today, because I don't know if you're paying attention to the news, but something that happens in the news today is, what are we doing? What are we going to do with all these refugees? They want to bring all these refugees. Germany decided to bring like 1 million of these Syrian refugees into their country, and the country is really having a difficult time dealing with this. We've brought some in as well, and the current administration wants to continue to bring refugees into this place. In fact, the latest plan, Bill Clinton supposedly came up with this plan. They want to bring about 10,000 of these refugees and give them Detroit. I don't think that's a good idea. You're going to bring all these mostly Muslim refugees into, and give them a city. They'll be, it's like they're just moving into your country, and you're going to provide them with all this money to finance it. And because they obviously bring them over, they don't speak the language, they're not going to be able to get jobs, and so the government has to take care of them. You can see here that historically, when these Visigoths fled to the Roman territory, they never could assimilate. History is teaching us that these refugees today do not assimilate, and they led to the downfall. Now, they didn't cause the downfall, but they led to the downfall. They helped lead to the downfall of the Roman Empire. As Rome grew, in the beginning they were very powerful. Their soldiers were powerful. They were mighty people. But as they got prosperous, their people began to get lazy. People didn't want to do anything. They certainly didn't want to fight. And so Rome started using mercenaries. And this guy here, Odoacer, he's the one who at first he was in charge of all these mercenaries. Well, you can see that he ended up taking the mercenaries, and he attacked Italy. He ended up becoming the king of Italy. Where's Rome located? For him to become the king of Italy meant he took over Rome. And that is how, Rome eventually fell. So you had these attacks coming from every different end, and the Roman Empire crumbled. However, Daniel the prophet is saying to us with that beast, Rome is not done. After the fall of the Roman Empire, this other horn is going to rise up, and it will be very much a part of the final Antichrist kingdom to come, which is going to happen shortly in our day. Now, as I said before, most of us would not be here to see it because the rapture should occur, and we wouldn't be here to see the revelation of the Antichrist, which we've talked a little bit on occasion. We'll be talking about it some more. This is once again the Roman Empire again, or the Roman. What was the Roman Empire? And you can see here the boot again. Rome is around here, and this shows the empire or the kingdom of Italy. So what we have here is in 476 AD, the German Odoacer, that's another way to say his name, it's the same guy, deposed the last West Roman emperor, proclaimed himself king over Italy. The Vandals ceded Sicily to him in the same year. So Sicily was over here. In other words, what it's saying here is he also not only became king of Italy, but then he gained Sicily as well. And so you can see how the Roman Empire is shattering. We're back with our beast here. So Daniel chapter 7, verse 23. So it says, and thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon the earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down and break it in pieces. Now, here's a kind of a key with the prophecy. It kind of just stands out at us, because we know it was found its fulfillment in the Roman Empire. But you'll notice that phrase, it says, it shall devour the whole earth. Now, the Roman Empire did devour a lot of the earth. But we know by that phrase that that's talking about in the last days. So in the last days, there will be a second fulfillment, or a latter-day fulfillment of this beast here, which really relates to the rising up of the Antichrist kingdom. And at that time, it's going to devour the whole earth. There is coming a time where the Antichrist will rule over the whole earth when he comes to his fullness of power. Remember, he doesn't do that because he's so smart. He does that because he's inhabited. Remember, the first 3.5 years, he's just a leader. But after the first 3.5 years, a spirit, an evil spirit from the bottomless pit goes inside him. And we know him to be the son of Satan. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall rise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue the 3 kings. Now here you have the 3 kings listed that we talked about before. For this horn is supposed to be the same as this horn. And for the horn to rise up, 3 horns come down. And those were the Ostrogoths, the Heruli, and the Vandals. And that's what occurred. And the end of it was in 476 AD, which was the fall of the Roman Empire. Now we're going to focus on this horn coming up. Well, so what happened? Yeah.
Real quick, sir. With all due respect, where did those names come from? Because we've never seen those names. And I'm curious. I'd like to know. I feel like I'm losing something here.
So you got the Heruli, you got the Ostrogoths, you got the Vandals, here you got the Visigoths, Franks, the Burgundians. So these were the 10. You got the Anglo-Saxons up there. Okay, so now let's go back to where we were.
If it would help, Ron, what was the time frame for that?
About 476 AD. Yeah. Okay, so it's a long time from right now. Okay,
they changed the names, of course.
Yeah, none of those.
The old maps.
None of those are, the same as they were. Those were just the names back then. Yeah, the map is not current as today's names. Okay, now we do have another video on YouTube that actually goes through and shows you, how these became the current territories and such. But yeah, that's why it's difficult maybe to piece that together. But you can get on Google. You could type in like Visigoths and it'll tell you what it became, and so you can find that all out if you get on the internet and look a little. So anyway, talking about the Roman Empire is fallen, and now this horn, which Daniel said would rise up, it begins to be in motion. In fact, this horn began rising up before those 3 horns fell. Okay? They were uprooted. In fact, uprooted. You can see them here in the blood. When you uproot something, if you just, if you pick weeds out, if you break weeds, they're going to just grow back. But if you uproot them, if you get the roots out, right? That's what happened. When it talks about uprooting, these horns are not coming back. And they really did not come back historically. Anyway, where do we see the horn really rising up then? We see it in about 732 AD when Charles Martel, his name was, they used to call him the Hammer. Charles Martel was called upon by the Pope at that time. There was invasion of the Muslims were coming, and they were invading Europe. And so the Pope knew that his time was going to be limited, if he didn't, get some help to fight them off. And so they called upon Charles Martel. Charles Martel happened to be the king of the Franks at the time. And, of course, from the Frankish kingdom came France. But so he called him, and Charles Martel stopped the Muslims from moving into Europe. And we'll see a map on that as well in a little while. At the same time, the Pope, which the Pope comes out of the Roman Empire, right? So when we talk about Rome, we're also talking about, remember, the latter-day fulfillment of the Antichrist comes with a false prophet. We said there's going to be a united religion, right? So there's going to be this false prophet working with the Antichrist kingdom. He's going to try to unite all the religions together. And what we see is this: when this horn is rising up, this is the beginning. When the horn rises, this is the beginning of that latter-day fulfillment that's going to happen in our day. In other words, so the kingdom is going to, this new kingdom of Rome is going to rise up. It's going to have an emperor, and it's going to have a prophet. That prophet happens to be the leader of the largest religious institution in the world.
False prophet.
Pardon?
He would be the false prophet.
And yes, and so he would be end up being the false prophet. The Pope sent out a guy by the name of Saint Boniface around this time, 675 through 754. And he is known for the slaughter of the Celtic Christians. Everybody knows when I say Celtic, or sometimes you hear people say Celtic. What that is Boniface went. His mission was to evangelize these Christians for Rome. Now, we all know that all Christians are not Roman Catholic, right?
Right.
You got Christians and you got Roman Catholic. But their idea, the Pope's idea, was that if you were not part of his religious institution, then you really weren't a Christian. And so he sent this Boniface out into Scotland and Ireland, and his mission was to evangelize. But they were already Christians, but they weren't Roman Catholic. What his commands was to be baptized in the Roman Catholic Church or die. That almost sounds like, the way the Muslims, we're worried about the Muslims coming. Well, really, Christianity, and it wasn't really Christianity, but Catholicism. But when the Muslims look at it, they say Christianity did the same thing. What are they complaining about, right? So, anyway, so Catholicism he sent the St. Boniface up in Scotland to Ireland. Well, the Celtic Christians, which were already Christian, they went around north and they came down into Germany. Well, he followed after them down to Germany, and he slaughtered most of the Celtic Christians. He slaughtered them.
When you say Celtic, does that just mean from Ireland or in that?
Yeah, Celtic or Celtic, yeah. Sometimes you listen to the music.
Right.
They got their own type of music.
Right. And then the word...
But you can pronounce it either way.
Did the word heretic come out of that movement there?
Well, heretic...
Against that?
Yeah, heretic is simply any... heretic really comes from Catholicism, I think. And anyone who opposes Catholicism was branded a heretic.
Right.
And if you were branded a heretic, you could be killed for it. And really, that's what they were branding them as, heretics. One of the things is they were not going to bow down or give allegiance to the Pope. There's really no scriptural authority for us to have a Pope, except for... the way he came into power was the emperor. Actually goes to the time even before this, the rising up of Charles Martel here, but the Emperor Constantine actually made the Bishop of Rome his man, or he put him in charge of the church in the Roman Empire when he became emperor. And this was like 300 AD. 300. And from there, he got recognition over all the rest of the bishops. And that's how the papacy came into existence. But anyway, we go into that as well in previous videos. So anyway, St. Boniface was known as the Apostle of Germany. And this idea of the slaughter of Celtic Christians, this was the way Catholicism would grow the Catholic Church. By killing Christians that opposed them.
How many were killed? Was it thousands? Millions?
Oh, well, in this case, there's probably 100,000 at least of these Celts which were slaughtered in Germany. And Pope Gregory III was the Pope at the time. He named the Archbishop, St. Boniface, the Archbishop and Primate of all Germany with power to establish bishoprics. So, fast forward to from Charles Martel to his grandson, which is Charles the Great. Now, has anybody ever heard of Charles the Great or Charlemagne? Okay, Charlemagne was his grandson, and he became the leader of the Holy Roman Empire. Okay, and so you see the horn, you can see it rising up. The papacy's there. Well, he was the emperor. See, the Roman Empire always has two things. It has the religious leader and it has the political leader. And they act as one. Okay? And so here the Pope called upon Charlemagne. Again, the whole idea was to put resistance against the spread of Islam. So in 800 AD, Charlemagne, Charles the Great, was crowned both king and emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. And in the Saxon campaigns, he imposed baptism by the sword. Now, have you ever heard, you've heard of baptism, right? But his idea of baptism was become Catholic or they'll cut your head off. And that's what Charlemagne... and so you can see that the terrible history that's behind this, okay? And now granted, most people are completely unaware of this. Although, you can look it up. You can still find it, the history on Google, if you do Google searches. But they're trying to, as time goes on, they're trying to remove some of the history. So eventually, in the future, you won't be able to find any of this to prove it to be true. But you still can. So anyway, he continued the slaughter of Christians who opposed the papacy. Tens of thousands were massacred in the name of Christian evangelism. And this is the method of Roman Catholic evangelism which made Europe a Christian world. Okay? Let's go back to our beast. Daniel chapter 7, verse 25. And you'll notice the phrase up here at the top, they shall be given into his hand. We could look historically, we could wonder, well, why did God allow this to happen? Why were so many Christians slaughtered by this beast rising up? Because it was a fulfillment of prophecy. God said it was going to happen, and it did happen. So let's read it here. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High. He'll think to change times and laws. And they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and the dividing of times. There's a lot of things that were changed. There's a lot of laws that were changed. When the papacy rose up and the Holy Roman Empire came into existence, they began to make laws that you had to follow or you could be slaughtered. You could be branded a heretic. You could be branded against the empire. I mean, that's just the way things were. But the key phrase here is they shall be given into his hand. Not only back then, but this beast will apply to the last days. So in the last days, the saints will also be given into his hand. Now, has everybody heard about the blood moons? Last year, we did a teaching on the blood moons. It's... I believe, and I believe that most people that have heard it here at the church also are in agreement that this is an amazing sign of this last generation. What it amounts to is there was 8 blood moons over the period of 2,000 years. It's not just a blood moon, but a blood moon tetrad. Well, one of those happened at the very time to single out the rising of Charlemagne. It was a 795 AD through 796 AD. What we did is we pointed out all 8 of these blood moons and the significant event that happened historically. It was like when this happened in the sky, God was saying, this is important. And we saw all 7 of them, and then we concluded that now the next one doesn't happen for 500 years. So we concluded that the coming of Christ, based upon everything we see, has to be coming soon. It's not going to be 500 years from now. And so the conclusion that we made was that this was what happened last year was the last one. And so we began to think about, is this significant? Is this blood moon, this last blood moon, was this significant for our time? Is God saying, basically, get ready, here I come? And I personally believe that, yes, He is. And I bring that up to you. If you want, go out on YouTube, watch what we have on the blood moons. I even have an updated one, which is actually smaller. It only takes about 25 minutes to go through it, 20 minutes to go through it. And it tells you all the significant things that happened for those 8 blood moons. And, of course, some of the final blood moons. One happened in 1948 when Israel was established. Another one was in 1967 when Jerusalem was captured. I mean, we're not just making stuff up. You can't make it say that, you know. These are signs, and I believe we're really close. Let's read this about Charlemagne. Charlemagne reigned for about 46 years with many wars and conquests. His kingdom spanned Germany, France, Switzerland, Austria, Hungary, Belgium, Spain, and Italy. So that was this Holy Roman Empire. Those were all the territories. One of the greatest influences in bringing the papacy to a position of world power and recognition was Charlemagne's Holy Roman Empire. Why is it? Because the Holy Roman Empire, the Pope doesn't really have any power outside the political power. You have to have the political arm. His Pope didn't have an army, right? Now, some say that he does have an army, but, you know, it's not like an army like you think of. But even in the Inquisition, he used the political kingdoms at the time throughout Europe to torture the people that what they call the heretics. But you had a question?
Yeah, what is a papist? I've heard the word before.
Okay, papist is basically someone who believes that the Pope is God's vicar. Infallible, yeah, that's one of the doctrines. If you believe that the Pope it's a religion, the religious leader of the Catholic Church. That's called the Catholic Church is actually called his seat, his throne is called a papacy. And he's the leader of the Catholic Church. And they believe, their doctrine is when he sits upon the throne and he makes a decision, he cannot make a mistake.
Yeah, it's like God.
He's like God. Yeah.
So if you're Catholic, are you considered a papist also?
You would be considered a papist. Yeah. Yeah, you would.
It is a negative derogatory term.
Yeah, it's derogatory. Yeah. But now, that being said, not all Catholics. There's a lot of Catholics today. If you get on the internet, you do some search around, you'll find out a lot of them don't even like this Pope. They believe he's Antichrist. So I mean, you can't just group everybody into one,
That's right.
group. But because people are so different, and you really don't know why they're involved and what they are involved, and what their thoughts are and what they really believe about Christ. But the problem with that institution is there's a lot of deception going on. There's a lot of false miracles. There's a lot of delusion. These are the kinds of things that Antichrist is going to use in the end. People follow after signs and miracles and wonders. They're setting themselves up to be deluded. If you're interested also, we have another video that just goes through all of the apparitions of Mary. And we show all of those, and we try to do it justice. After the death of Charlemagne, the kingdom would be divided, as in the Treaty of Verdun, becoming the foundations of France, Germany, and Italy. We'll see a map in a minute. So in other words, what it's saying is this Holy Roman Empire, actually, when Charlemagne dies, the kingdom is divided into 3 separate nations, and they become France, Germany, and Italy. They all split away. And Charlemagne gave rise to the continual struggle between the popes and Germany and France kings. The Holy Roman Empire would continue for 1,000 years until Napoleon comes into power, and he brings it to an end. Napoleon follows the French Revolution. If you know anything about it, if you saw that, what was that movie called?
Oh, Les Miserables?
Yeah.
Les Miserables. It's Les Miserables.
But that was an incredible movie. If you got a chance to see that, and but that was about the French Revolution. Napoleon comes around later. What that was all about was throwing off the Catholic Church. Napoleon actually, when he got in power, he took the Pope and he threw him in prison. And that and some people say that that was the papacy receiving a mortal wound. What were you saying?
Why did he throw him in prison? What was...
The revolution that was going on was freedom from the dominion of the papacy ruling over all of Europe. And so kingdoms were rising, but this is during the period of the Reformation. Christians were beginning to have Bibles in their hands. The printing press was there. They could read the Bible for themselves. They realized that, hey, you know what? This teaching that's coming over there, this does not line up with the Scripture. So they begin to throw off this from off the papacy and the false teaching of Catholicism. And it got to the point where Napoleon was so much against that he actually broke Catholicism, and he threw him right into it. What was that?
For a time, right?
For a time. He actually, if you're familiar with the beast, it says in Revelation chapter 13, the beast receives a mortal wound. There's a lot of people that believe that when Napoleon did that, he threw the Pope in prison. He actually gave a mortal wound to that institution. They did not come back into power until the days of Mussolini. Mussolini gave the papal states and the power back to the papacy and back to the Pope. So they basically, for over 100 years, were powerless. You can see what they were up against, though. The Pope, of course, you can't really make out the boot here. You can make out Sicily. But there's Europe. Europe is yellow. You can see Constantinople. That was the we've talked about that before. That's the other. That's the headquarters of the empire, or the emperor himself. And all of this purple, this is Muslim. And the Muslims, they came out of Saudi Arabia here. They went in the different directions. They came all the way across northern Africa. They went up into Spain. And that's when Charles Martel got involved, we brought up, and now Charlemagne. They had to do something. And very likely, if Charlemagne wouldn't have arose up, if the Holy Roman Empire wouldn't have been there, we may have all been Muslim today, because there wouldn't have been anything to stop it. The next slide shows that division of Charlemagne's empire. Now, all this color that you see here, the purple, the yellow, the green, all of this was Charlemagne's Holy Roman Empire. But when he died, it divided into three parts. His three sons took over. And you can see here, you had, this became Italy, this became Germany, and this became France. Now, the whole thing was considered to be the Holy Roman Empire. Originally, Charlemagne came out, he was a king of the Franks. He was considered to be, have you heard of, in Adolf Hitler, they talk about Adolf Hitler and the Reich. Have you heard of Reich? The word Reich? The Third Reich, right? Well, what happened to 1 and 2? Well, you just wake up one day and said, I'm the third?
You want revised.
You improvised? Well, there was a 1 and 2. And it actually is important because it's important for understanding biblical prophecy of how this all came about. Because remember, the Holy Roman Empire, that's that horn rising up, right? We've got the papacy coming out of it, and we've got the Holy Roman Empire coming out of it. And Charlemagne is the First Reich. And Adolf Hitler was the Third Reich. Now, if you ask the Germans, actually, they would say the First Reich was Otto the Great. Otto the First was king of Germany from 936 to 973. Now again, we say Charlemagne was in 800 AD. He was emperor of the Holy Roman Empire from 962 to 973. But the term Holy Roman Empire was first used throughout the empire in 962 AD. So they associate Otto with being the First Reich. But see, that's kind of crazy to think like that, because he's the first, they say he's the First Reich, or the first emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, but it started with Charlemagne. So he's actually carried, it hasn't ceased. It's still, he's still because it does come to an end. And so he's not really a number at all. Charlemagne started, he's number one, and then Otto's one of them, of that empire, of the First Reich. Okay, but you can think of it either way. But I'm just saying, if in German textbooks, school textbooks, they'll say Otto was. And I think that's because they want to separate it from the Catholic part of it. I don't know why. This is where Egypt is. You got the Sinai Peninsula, and then up here is where Israel is. And, of course, Jerusalem's in Israel. Jerusalem is a primary focal point of all Bible prophecy. Okay? We read here that historically Rome, and when we see Eastern Roman Byzantine Empire and all that's in the purple, that was the eastern part of the Roman Empire. Remember, there were two. Remember, there were the two legs. There was the west part of the empire, and there was the east part of the empire. Well, remember, the west part of the Roman Empire got really beat up, okay, by all these tribes coming in. But anyway, historically, Rome possessed Jerusalem until the Persian army conquered Jerusalem, destroying most of the churches, and they expelled all the Jews in 614 AD. And that which followed was the surrender of the Byzantine Jerusalem to Caliph Umar. Everybody knows what the Caliph is? The Caliph or Caliphate, that's the leader of the Muslim Empire, right? So he's the leader of the Caliphate back at that time. From that time forward, lasting until the time of the Crusades, Jerusalem was ruled by Muslims. So what happened is you had the Persian Empire over here. He came out of here. He attacked the Persians, he attacked the Christian Byzantine Empire, and he ended up taking over Jerusalem. And it's important because last week we talked about the Antichrist beast had 7 heads. John said one was in power at the time he was writing the book, and one was yet to come. One of the things all the heads have in common is they all took over Jerusalem. They all controlled Jerusalem. That's the common link here. You see, have you ever wondered how, in Jerusalem, if this is God's place, why is this sitting on the Temple Mount?
True.
Right? So, well, here's why. So this Caliph of Omar, when he takes over, the Muslims have. This is something they do. Whenever Muslims take over something, as far as they're concerned, it's theirs throughout eternity. So they are not going to give up any ground. That is Islam in a nutshell. They will not give up. They will come back 1,000 years later to get back what they've lost. They will take it back. And that's just built into their beliefs. Anyway, so under Caliph Omar's leadership, the first great expansion of Islam outside of Arabia took place. It expanded to Egypt, Syria, Iraq, and the northern part of Mesopotamia, became Islamic territories, and the armies of the Persian Empire were routed several times. Omar, aided by brilliant field generals, conducted military campaigns against the 2 leading empires of his time, and the Persians in Iran and Iraq, and the Byzantines in Syria and Egypt. And now this building you see here is called the Dome of the Rock. The Dome of the Rock is the oldest extant Islamic structure, stands on the sacred rock in Jerusalem where the Prophet Muhammad is believed to have ascended into heaven. Have you heard that about Islam? They believe that Muhammad actually ascended. And it's actually the same place that Abraham offered up Isaac. Although, if you read the Quran, how many has a copy of the Quran? Have you ever looked at Quran? In the Quran, it actually doesn't say Abraham offered up Isaac. It says he offered up Ishmael, which was his other son. Which they, Muslims, they trace their heritage in their religion through Ishmael. Yeah.
I was talking with a person the other day that, they told me that this biggest holiday that the Muslims are having, we're still in it now, right?
Yeah.
It started a few days ago. I forgot what the name.
Yeah, I don't know.
But they said that it's the holiday that celebrates the fact when Abraham took Isaac to the altar to sacrifice him and told him to spare his life because he just wanted to test his faith.
Right.
And when I mentioned to him that came straight out of the Holy Bible, he was shocked. So.
Yeah, except for it's not Isaac, it's Ishmael.
That's what they...
Yeah, they believe it's Ishmael. Now, here's the problem. Some people, liberal theologians will say, well, what's the difference? Abraham offered up his son as a sacrifice. What does it matter if it's Ishmael or Isaac? Well, it's the same thing when you go back, and I say this many times, when you go back to the Garden of Eden, and Satan asks Eve, hath God said? And then he said, did God say you can't eat of this tree? And she began to add to the word, and right? As soon as you deviate from the word of God, you get yourself in trouble, right? And so you take, when you deviate and you say, well, it doesn't really matter if it was Isaac or Ishmael. Yes, it does. It matters a whole bunch. It matters so much because you got a little, maybe almost a couple billion Christians in the world, supposedly, if you count all of them. And then you got almost a couple billion Muslims. It matters which side of the fence you're on. And it all depends on do you believe it's Isaac or do you believe it's Ishmael, right? But anyway, so you got this Dome of the Rock, and this was built by this Caliph Omar in 638. And when the city came under Muslim control, following the conquest of Caliph Omar, you can say it either way. It's spelled either way also if you do some research on it to look it up. So don't get confused by that. But what I just said about when Islam takes over something, they have it forever. Now you can see why they're not going to just let Israel have the Temple Mount. They're not going to do it. So, that's a big issue. We've covered this in when we got into 11th chapter of Revelation, but Revelation 11 starts out with the building of the temple. And now what I've said is I believe, and this is what I taught, that Elijah is returning back to the earth. And even though Israel would have a hard time building that temple, when Elijah comes, it says that he's one of the two witnesses. It says that they can't touch him. Nobody's going to be able to touch him because fire will come out of his mouth and devour him. And he's going to build that temple. There's also going to be 144,000 Israelites, 12,000 from each tribe, sealed around that time. Of course, that has nothing to do with the rapture. The rapture of the church in Israel, that's two different things. Okay? Now, some people want to say, well, the church and the Israel is supposed to be the same thing, and you have denominations like that, but they are separate. Anyway, the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque, there's actually two structures there, were soon constructed on the Temple Mount with the Dome of the Rock standing on the site of the first and second temples. It says first and second temple. Some people say that Herod's temple, the one that was in existence at the time of Jesus, that was a third temple. It's not really a third temple. That's a second temple, but it was like A lot of upgrades that were done in Herod's time. If you want to think of it as a third temple, that's okay. But sometimes it's confusing depending on who you're listening to. They're talking about the temple. They may say third temple. Well, there is going to be a third temple, and that's the one that's going to be built right before Jesus comes. And there's going to be a fourth temple, because in the millennial kingdom, the book of Ezekiel says there's going to be a temple built. But if you do the math the other way, you come up with 5 temples, okay? Which is just something to be aware of. There's nothing wrong either way. You can call Herod's temple a third temple if you want. We spoke about this when we were talking about the trumpets. And the idea is to understand what was happening historically at that time period, and also though to show the emphasis on. When did that 7th head, Thrace, when did that actually come into power? And there's a whole lot in the Bible about that, but a lot of people, because they don't regard the history of what happened, they miss out on this. And so if you get a chance, go back and look at the 7 trumpets, the videos on that. But it was 762 AD when Baghdad became the capital of the Eastern Caliphate, and the Caliph of Baghdad sent for a Turk by the name of Tughril Bey, declared to be both the protector and the governor of the Islamic Empire. You can see Baghdad circled there, by the way, on the map. And this Tughril Bey is the one who really brought the Turks into the picture. And we know how important that is, because the last nation, or the last empire to have possession of Jerusalem, when Jerusalem was set free at the end of World War I, was who? The Turks. The Ottoman Empire. So they took, we saw when they came in, when the Muslims came in, and they built this Dome of the Rock, and they had it for a little while, and then they lost it back to the Crusaders, but then they got it back, and they ended up keeping it all the way until the end of World War I, which shortly after World War I is when Israel would begin moving back into the land. Of course, they didn't have their land Israel yet, because that wouldn't happen until after World War II. But you could see that that's the last thing. It's important because John, when he's talking about the beast, he says there's 7 heads. He didn't say there's 9 heads, right? He didn't say there's 5. He said there's 7 heads. 5 have already passed. 1 that was Rome. 1 is yet to come. And when it comes, it'll be there for a short while, and then an 8th will come. And then he said, but the 8th is of the 7. So it's kind of like a riddle, but if you're going to understand it, you have to know, you have to identify what these heads are, and all this comes from the book of Daniel. So I believe we're right on target as far as being, sometimes you're error prone when you look at prophecy. But if you really try to stick with what God gives you, I think you can do a lot of justice to the scripture here. So anyway, this next map, you can see here again. Here's the Byzantine Empire would be up here by Constantinople. That's the Christian, the Eastern Christian nation. It was called the Byzantine Empire. It used to be called the Eastern Roman Empire. There was a Western Rome and there was Eastern Rome. But then Eastern Rome ended up being called Byzantine, and it kind of throws people when they start doing history. But look at when the Turks took over. Look at all of this yellow. This is all Muslim. Does anybody see that they're after world domination? Their agenda has not changed. I mean, we could argue all day long. We could say, well, Islam is a religion of peace. Well, if they can do this peacefully, they will. And if they can't, they'll use the sword. But they're going forward. And you see all the land that they had, they don't plan on giving any of it up. They plan on advancing. Right? Anyway, it says the Turkish dynasty ruled Jerusalem harshly in the 11th century and continued to expand, especially toward Europe. During the 11th century, Asia Minor was invaded by the Seljuk Turks, and the eastern part of the region became predominantly Turkish in character. Remember, Turkey, or Thrace, is that seventh head of the beast. The next thing that followed is, of course, the Crusades. Now, the Crusades all have to do about Muslim versus Christian. Really, it's Muslim versus Rome. Okay, because the Pope is the one who sends out the Crusaders. But in 1010 A.D., Hakam, the mad sultan of Egypt, attempted to destroy Christianity in Jerusalem, and the Jews began to be persecuted throughout Europe there. In 1085 AD, Pope Gregory VII called for Christians to unite for war against the Muslim infidels to liberate the Holy Land from Islam. And that's how it all began. Now, in 1086 AD, Pope Victor III promised remission of all sins to whoever would partake in the crusade. Well, that's a good deal, isn't it? Isn't that a good deal? So, in other words, what if President Obama right now, he needs to get infantry. He wants to launch a war. So he says, he gets the Pope on his side, and he says, well, whoever joins the military, remission of all sins.
Who needs Jesus, right?
Right. Who needs Jesus? That's right. And so, and these are, and the thing is, this shows you the ridiculousness of the papacy to begin with, because the other thing they'll do, things that came out, well, they would sell indulgences. Now, indulgences, to understand that would be like, let's say you're the priest, and I come and I like my neighbor. I mean, she's really pretty. And of course, I'm married. My wife don't want me to hang around with my neighbor, so I go to the priest and I say, I want to commit adultery with her, but I'm afraid I'll go to hell. And the priest says, well, you know what? If you give me $1,000, I'll forgive you. So not only I give you $2,000 because I'm going to do it twice. Right? I mean, this is the thinking. This is the thinking here. So. But that's the way it is, right? They do. How many have heard of purgatory? You've heard of purgatory? They do the same thing with purgatory. This is one of the things this really makes me mad. I was actually raised Catholic myself, and I know a lot about this. But what makes me mad about it is people die. I mean, they are most Catholics are sincere. They're trying to do right. They're believing what they've been taught right. And then some loved one dies, and here comes the priest with that. They're trying to get money. See, and what they tell them is, your loved one is going to purgatory, and is going to stay in purgatory for a long, long time. But if you give money to the church, we'll say masses. And for each mass we say, we'll get them out early. Yeah, we're going to bump them up the line there. So you got the sale of the indulgences. You got a lot of stuff. In fact, I don't know if I handed it out here, but I had a list of 365 things that they do like that. And it's terrible when your eyes are opened up to it. It's really going on,
Everybody still got that list.
Huh? You need a copy of that list?
I'm going to mail a bunch of that stuff to California and Mexico.